But again, this gets to the Democratic solutions have never been to directly provide. It's always been a subsidy to a middleman. But what happens is when the government promises endless funds to insurance companies or private universities, is it frustrating that the thing that you fought for your whole career, Democrats are the ones who run away from scared? And he's embraced some of it.
Bernie Sanders appeared on Jon Stewart's show recently, and after the kind of brutal exchange he endured, it's hard to imagine him returning anytime soon, if ever.
When the government promises endless funds to insurance companies or private universities without any cost controls, and Trump seems to understand this, prices rise far beyond the rate of inflation.
But Stewart cornered Sanders into conceding that socialism falls short and could leave America worse off than it already is.
And we've seen it in tuition, and we've seen it in pharmaceutical, and we've seen it in health care.
At one point, Sanders even acknowledged that some policies introduced by Donald Trump have done more to support the working class than anything Democrats have seriously put forward.
Does that change the calculus now for Democrats to govern with more balls?
I think it does. I think it does. I mean, they've seen a boldness on the part of Trump using his power in a way that we have never seen before.
So, if you're into bold, no-holds-barred political commentary, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. But first, let's start with this video of Bernie Sanders claiming that open borders are risky and why we need tariffs to protect our manufacturing industry.
Open borders? That's a Koch brothers proposal. The idea, of course, I mean, that's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. And I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America, because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street, people who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, healthcare, pensions, throw them out on the street because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America.
The contradiction. What was being promoted a decade ago by the likes of Bernie Sanders is today suddenly labeled as far-right, even authoritarian policy. Back in 2015 and even earlier in 2008, Sanders openly criticized the idea of completely open borders and supported the use of tariffs to protect American workers. Those positions weren't controversial then. They were framed as common-sense economic nationalism aimed at preserving jobs and stabilizing industries. So what changed? The policies didn't magically transform overnight. The real shift happened when Donald Trump emerged as a serious political force and began championing similar ideas. Once he gained traction, the narrative flipped. Positions that were once acceptable, even mainstream, were suddenly rebranded as extreme. It raises a bigger question. Was it ever about the policies themselves or simply about who was delivering them? And that's why Bernie Sanders was challenged when Jon Stewart reminded him of his own policies back in the day.
He's the most socialist president of my lifetime. Taking a percentage of companies to do business, that's a Bernie Sanders idea.
We all know Donald Trump isn't a socialist president, so there's no need to belabor that point. What he has done, however, is double down on traditionally right-leaning ideas, arguing that the government's primary role is to create a stable, business-friendly environment where companies can grow, invest, and hire. The thinking is simple. When businesses thrive, jobs follow, and the broader economy benefits.
It's frustrating that the thing that you fought for your whole career, Democrats are the ones who run away from scared. And he's embraced some of it.
Left, by contrast, tends to emphasize redistribution, using government programs to move wealth from higher earners to those in need. In theory, government exists to serve the people. But critics often point to what they saw during Joe Biden's tenure, in which figures like Nancy Pelosi faced criticism over stock trading activity, raising serious questions about priorities and accountability in Washington. And this is where Jon Stewart forces Bernie Sanders to admit that socialism doesn't work.
What happens is when the government promises endless funds to insurance companies or private universities without any cost controls, and Trump seems to understand this, prices rise far beyond the rate of inflation. And we've seen it in tuition, and we've seen it in pharmaceutical, and we've seen it in healthcare.
Jon Stewart raised the question of why socialism struggles in practice. Even Bernie Sanders appeared to nod along. It brings up a blunt concern. Why hand more control and resources to government systems that already struggle with transparency and accountability? Under Joe Biden, taxes have been a major talking point, but critics keep asking, what tangible results can people actually point to? Look at places like California, often cited in this debate. Despite having some of the highest tax rates in the country, the state continues to grapple with rising homelessness, recurring wildfire crises, and a steady departure of major industries seeking friendlier business environments elsewhere. For many observers, it raises a bigger issue. If high taxation is meant to improve living conditions, why do these problems seem to persist or in some cases worsen over time?
I find there is a gag reflex from, and I think both parties have it, a gag reflex on Robert Kennedy says, ultra processed foods are killing Americans. And I'm like, yeah,
That's right.
God awful. That's got to change. But if you were to say that, boy, are you just dogpiled. How can you agree with Robert Kennedy Jr. on anything? He's this and that. And Elon Musk says we've got waste and inefficiency in the government. And we're like, yeah, we've been yelling about that for years. And as soon as you do that, how dare you? It's really interesting.
It's a fascinating moment when Jon Stewart calls out Bernie Sanders and the Democratic National Committee over what critics often describe as Trump derangement syndrome. The term itself is loaded, but Stewart's point seems to center on excess, arguing that opposition to Donald Trump can sometimes become so consuming that it overshadows clear thinking or balanced critique. What makes it more intriguing is that Stewart himself hasn't exactly been immune to sharp criticism of Trump in the past. He's had his own moments of intense pushback. Yet here, he appears to be drawing a line, suggesting that the broader party may be overindulging in constant outrage to the point where it becomes counterproductive. It reflects a growing tension within political discourse where even critics are beginning to question whether relentless opposition is helping their cause or quietly undermining.
What they end up doing is coming up with very complicated proposals. You make $48,964.
Yes!
You will get this thing. You make $1 more, you finish the blah, blah, blah.
In a telling moment, Jon Stewart presses Bernie Sanders into acknowledging something many critics have argued for years, that Democrats often overcomplicate even the simplest issues. The problem isn't always intent, it's execution. Layers of bureaucracy pile up, turning straightforward projects into drawn-out processes filled with endless paperwork, approvals, and regulatory hurdles. By the time anything actually gets done, you've navigated a maze of red tape that slows progress to a crawl. And here's the kicker, all that delay and administrative overhead often ends up costing more than the project itself. Instead of efficiency, you get bloated systems that drain resources and frustrate the very people they're supposed to help. It raises a fair question. At what point does governance stop being about solutions and start becoming part of the problem itself?